Call to order the regular board meeting of Tuesday, December 17th at 7 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be led by the Anchor Bay Junior ROTC. Please rise. Thank you to the Anchor Bay Junior ROTC. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Accavetti?
Here.
Treasurer LaFata?
Here.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Joseph?
Here.
Trustee Demink?
Here.
Trustee Vosburg?
Clerk Barry did send a message that she was going to be a little late. Please
I'll swear him in.
note her
I'll swear him
time.
in, Supervisor Accavetti. No problem.
Item number 4, presentations. 4A, approve a request by the Department of Public Safety to present a new patrol officer candidate, Ryan Wilson, for the oath of office. Director Kirsten.
I'd like to call Ryan Wilson, front and center. I'd like to introduce you Officer Ryan Wilson, our newest member of the Chesterfield Township Police Department. Ryan comes to us from the Anchor Bay area. He is an Anchor Bay graduate. His previous employer was the Michigan State Police Motor Carrier Division. He just recently graduated from the Macomb Community College Basic Police Academy today. Trustee Anderson was our guest and witnessed it. Ryan received high marks and a couple awards from the Academy. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Officer Wilson for the oath of office and our newest Chesterfield Township Police Officer.
Chief, could you tell us where he comes from? My understanding is he's worked with state police as well. Officer Wilson? Yes, sir. Works with the state police as well?
Yes, State Police Motor Carrier Division. He's a motor carrier enforcement officer with the state police. And spent some time there, decided to leave and join our department here in Chesterfield. He is a Anchor Bay High School resident, or high school graduate, and an Anchor Bay resident in Chesterfield.
Thank you.
Clerk Barry will administer the oath of office.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and I will faithfully perform the duties
of the office of police officer
in the office of police officer
in and for the township of Chesterfield,
in and for the Township of Chesterfield,
County of Macomb,
County of Macomb,
State of Michigan,
State of Michigan,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard and welcome home, Officer Wilson.
Thank you, sir.
Item 5, department reports. Would any departments like to update the board and the residents on any issues in their township? Any board members? Trustee Demink?
No, what I'm
Parks and
going
Rec?
to say, What I say, I'll say in my board comments. I only got one thing. All right.
Any board members? A couple from me. Jefferson Road Bridge, open. Finally, a week ago from Friday. There will be final coloring and punch list work done in the spring, but the closure of Jefferson will not need to be done again for a very, very long time. And also, just a heads up, on March 4th at 6 o'clock, there'll be a town hall meeting in this room with Macomb County Emergency Management regarding the high water levels around our township and around the region. Item 6 is the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda are permitted. Tonight's consent agenda include the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 3rd, approval of the agenda, and approval of the payment of bills. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Clerk Berry. Support. Support by Trustee Vosburg. Discussion. Comments from the public. Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Vosburg to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye. The consent agenda passes. 7A. 7 is the public hearing. We do have a public hearing tonight. 7A is to conduct a public hearing to hear comments regarding the 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan from the years 2020 through 2024.
So moved.
We'll begin with a presentation by Giffels Webster. Motion by Trustee Demink.
Support?
Support by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Berry, please call the roll for the public hearing to open.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg. Aye. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
The public hearing is hereby open. Welcome. I think you got a little bit of IT stuff to work on, and I'll turn it over to Rod with Giffels Webster.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Rod Arroyo with Giffels Webster. I'm here with Matt Wojciechowski. We've been working closely with your staff as well as the Parks and Recreation Commission to review and update your 5-year master plan for Parks and Recreation. One of the things that is an advantage to going through this process is once you've completed it and received approval from the DNR, you're then in a position to apply for funding that is offered from a number of sources through the state of Michigan over that next 5-year period. So that's an excellent opportunity to try to leverage some of the township dollars once this has been approved at the DNR level. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he's going to take you through a brief presentation.
Hello, Matt Wojciechowski. So I'm going to walk you through the basic elements of the plan, highlight some of the items that were updated, and then just briefly review the action strategies that were updated with this plan.
This is the public hearing part for the public to testify, and then we'll have an actual action item on this. So maybe if we could hold off board comments until after that and see if, open it up to the public for public comment on Parks and Rec master plan pursuant to the public hearing. And then there will be an action item after this on the regular agenda.
We also have 3 members from our Parks and Rec Commission in the audience tonight, too.
Wondering, going through this, a lot of it, I think, should be questioned as to whether we're going to get $45 million worth of walking or whatever it is out of it, specifically because of our track record, I guess, on how we do with projects that are now at hand. Basically, starting off with Weber Park Department. In 3 years, money's been spent. Nothing's been accomplished. You had the engineering development brought back. It was money spent for, basically got nothing out of it. And the money that was spent, from what I understand, we can't recoup anything from the state board. So that's not going well. The Veterans Park was closed. And I wonder why we're looking at adding other parks and just dropping that. The main reason I heard that it was closed was because we didn't want to take care of it. Well, that's what happened with Brandenburg too. We didn't take care of it. So now we're looking for solutions. How do we fix Brandenburg? And the thing that came up with was get a grant from the state, put in, basically, I guess, a spawning area for fish. When we talked about that, I offered the suggestion that maybe we should put the street wall back in and open it up for swimming. Didn't go over well here. Apparently there were other people that watched the videos and got comments back from them. They thought it was a good idea. So these things were happening without any input to the public. Basically, there's a way to get out of our troubles that we didn't do by trying to get free money to take care of it instead of giving what we need or what we want, spending our own money. Township on the Marsh Recreation, Reclamation area on the Salt River. Township's part of it was taking care of all the phragmites. Essentially sprayed 2 years in a row, despite objections from everybody, me included, that we didn't want roundup sprayed on the Salt River. And then beyond that, we didn't cut the phragmites. So you spent money over the 2 years, and you got the same section you had before. The only thing that contained the phragmites this year was a high water bill. There was some promise of cutting the phragmites a while back, that you would see the location be cut in December. In December, I haven't heard anything as to where those phragmites are being cut. We're going to use the people that we pulled off of the chipping program that we had through phragmites. That didn't happen. The other thing I got to say, like I say, you did a nice job, a lot of opportunity out there. If you're looking at a $45 million bill, and you basically canvass 1% of the population, or less than 1%. I think with the opportunity today, with all of the way we can communicate with each other, you can even send letters to all of the homeowners, giving them the same thing, and get feedback from them as to what they like. And then you get what the township truly wants, not taking a look at what 400 people said was done. And with that, I know this first thing you're going to talk about is the acquisition of that.
Stay on the master plan only in this public hearing. That item will be on there. If you want to talk about that, you'll be able to come up again. It's a part of it. Just try to stay on the master plan portion only? Okay, go ahead, proceed. I'm just letting you know, we're talking about the master plan, not, that's got its own item.
I used to walk that area a long time ago before they removed the bridge. Roads not very good. And basically, all you're gonna do is you acquire that land, you're saying you're gonna put piers or something along that area down at the end. It still has to lead someplace. So I presume it's gonna open up back on Embassy Court where it ends now. But essentially, for that 32 acres, so all you got is along that river. You can do the same thing now, just putting this thing there along that river. You can see the same thing and do it for nothing. Just develop the sidewalk or something down there, and you got the same thing without spending $300,000. Anyway, I guess to sum up with, I think this deserves a lot more daylight to citizens other than just the 400 people that we've sent it out to.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Any further? Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Alan Chris, I live on Donahue, and I'm a member of the Parks and Rec Board. Just to address a few of the concerns. 45 million, I think that's, Josh, maybe backing up on that, that's like total cost of everything that we're in the plan. The main reason for the plan is we want to list everything we want to accomplish. It would be great if we could accomplish it all, but if we don't list it, we can't accomplish it. So that's part of the reason for that. Veterans Park, I think we lost because it had something to do with Maryland. It wasn't, we didn't want to take care of it.
Mr. Crisp, you should have addressed the board. Is all.
Well, I was asking
Yeah.
Josh,
Okay.
but I really, Josh, Veterans Park, it had something to do with the military, we wanted to take it back, so I'm not sure exactly what it was. The Craig Point, I agree with you. I think it's a bad idea to put Roundup in the Salt River or any of the creek areas that go out to the lake. Roundup isn't, it's not a very good thing to put in the water. I'm an avid fisherman, and I love to eat the walleye out of the lake. I'd hate to eat them if they're filled up with Roundup. As far as Rainbird goes, the seawall is collapsing. I believe that the thing we came up with the soft shore and spawning areas in that, it's actually cheaper than replacing the seawall. And it'd be a little bit more useful, especially if we can put a, like you said, a fishing area, spawning area in there, make it a little bit more recreational. And then all other upgrades there, there's so neat, the building, it's in need of repair, and it just needs to be updated. But like I said, none of this would happen if we don't put it all on the plan. It's not like we're going to say, hey, we need $45 million. We would put up a lot of it, but a lot of that would be that grant. That's it.
Any further public comments? This is a public hearing. Going once, going twice. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Clerk Berry.
Support?
Support by Trustee Joseph to close the public hearing. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Echevetti.
Aye. The public hearing is closed at 7:25 PM. Item 8 is the regular agenda. 8A, adopt Resolution 2019-43, adopting the 2020 through 2024 Chesterfield Township Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Do I have a motion?
Support? Motion support.
Motion by Trustee Demink. Support by Trustee Vosburg. Discussion. Trustee Vosburg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you for all the work, everybody that participated in that. I think it was, came out with a good results. We've got lots of good ideas. And I just had one technical question, and it listed some additional property. If we could acquire, it had an address on Sugar Bush. Where is that located?
I'll show you. It's directly across from this parcel.
Okay, I think the address is wrong. That's all. And if that matters, that needs to be fixed. But if that's the piece.
Directly across from this
Okay,
parcel.
right next to the of a
Yes.
river? Thank you.
That's correct. Trustee Demink.
I think it was a great job by Giffels Webster. I thank you guys. I'd like to thank the people from the Parks and Rec Commission who are here. They worked hard on this, along with our director, who is not available to be here tonight due to a family issue, which I'll address later on. But I think it's a lot of good ideas for the township. I'm the liaison. No, we're not going to go out and spend $45 million next year. I can guarantee you that. Everything takes time. This is a work in progress. I'm sure by the time we spend that kind of money, I'll be pushing up daisies someplace and won't be here. But it's a plan. It's for a future. It's for the younger generation of Chesterfield. There's a lot of young residents, young families moving in here. Those were the ideas that were received by the commission and the surveys that were put out. You know, only 400 people applied. You know, that's what we got. But I think it's a move forward and to a future somewhere down the road. Not tomorrow, not next year, but it's something for the people of this township. There's always been talk of rec center. I think every board member's heard it from people up here. Oh, we want a rec center like Macomb Township. Things take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So we'll see where it goes, but we have to work together, and it takes time. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you. I just had a technical question, or I guess the presentation from Giffels, this was the public hearing portion, and then there's a period of 30 days after the public hearing, or the 30 days was?
So the microphone could pick you up.
There was a notice posted in the paper right around November 15th.
Okay.
That the plan had been approved by the Recreation Commission, and that was between, I believe it was November 15th and December 17th today, was the 30-day review.
So the 30-day review period was notifying residents, now that the plan's been approved in the Parks and Rec, by the Parks and Rec Commission, it would come to the full board for ratification, and that's the 30 days you were talking. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. The comments that I had just kind of stem from the presenter that came forward. I think Trustee Demink kind of captured my feelings on it. This isn't an approval for $45 million. This is approval for a working concept with some ideas that were brought about through a process that tried to engage the public through surveys. It's something that the board has been talking about. It's something that I know all of the Parks and Rec Commission members are big advocates. Mr. Christ has been volunteering his time in this community for a long time, long as I can recall. He does a lot of great work. He spends a lot of his time working with young people in our community and helping them to take up something he's very passionate about, and fishing, and works with a lot of kids that would have never had the opportunity to go out and do fishing on our lake. And he teaches them how to do that, and he's done that through his involvement with Parks and Rec. We got some great people over there, and they've certainly been ambassadors for this Parks and Rec master plan. So I know a lot of these things are still in the idea phase, and there are things that I don't see us being able to accomplish tomorrow. I share some of the concerns about some of our current assets, and what are we doing to maximize the benefit for our residents with current assets before we go out and bring on more assets that we're not prepared to develop and help our residents maximize, their potential. We got some great things going on in the township that I think we could do. We'll talk more about some of them later on in this agenda, but in terms of the master plan, I'm really grateful for commission members like Mr. Christ, who just put their guts into this township, and they care very deeply about making sure that we utilize what limited assets we have. So thanks to the Giffels team, and thanks to the commissioners who continue to serve our community in a great way. It's a good plan. It's a good start, and look forward to hearing about some of the great ideas in Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Any further comments? Treasurer LaFato.
When I'm looking at the resident involvement, it stated that there was 411 participants out of 44,700 and some residents. And I'm just wondering that based on that sample size, if our priorities are exactly what they should be, because based on that sample size, it's got priorities for the purchase of Hooker Road property, prioritize Weber Paddle Park. And if you look at the sample size based on the amount of residents, look at the sample size based on the number of residents that voted in the 2016 presidential election, we're talking about less than 1% by population. We're talking about 1.6% by voters that voted in the last presidential election. And I'm just wondering, I understand the master plan, and I'm just wondering if there shouldn't be some adjustments made, because the other data says that the population demographics are 55 to 85 are probably around 40% of the population, and I'm not sure how a Hooker Road piece of property or how a Weber Paddle Park suits that demographic age in the township. So, and how it satisfies the priority for spending in 2020, and whether or not this part should be looked at before we finalize the master plan, because I think there's some discrepancies, because based on the sample size, based on the demographics, the priority doesn't really make sense. Not that they shouldn't happen, but I'm not sure that that should be the first priority. When you look at some of the ADA non-compliances in our parks and recreation area, there's a lot of ADA non-compliance. And if you look at the age demographics in the township, you would think that that would be the first thing that we would want to take care of, would be the compliance, so that we can accommodate our older people and those that are handicapped. And that's not one of the first priorities on the list. So I'm just wondering if we can't do some adjustment to this before it's finalized.
Try to answer a couple of questions. Regarding the sample size, generally we find that if we get at least 300 people participating, we feel pretty good about the numbers. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to get people to participate in surveys, because you'll might have to come and get sent a survey, survey after survey. We felt good about the numbers that came in. We're over 400. That's great. We think it's a pretty good representation. So from that perspective, that's just our experience, and particularly doing a lot of surveys in a lot of different communities. Priority component is something you're going to have to address on a year-to-year basis. Obviously, you're going to have in your budget items that you're going to be addressing. I think this plan has facilities and improvements that serve all ages. Some of them are going to be more attractive to younger, and some more to older, and some will go across the board for all ages. So that's part of what you try to do. You have a variety of folks living here, and you try to address that. So I think the plan does a good job in trying to serve folks of different ages and different interests. So I'm sure you'll be dealing with just like you're not going to build a whole plan in 5 years, you're probably going to be readdressing priorities as you move forward and as things change. So I think you have the ability to do that with your annual budget.
So basically, you're saying the priorities aren't written in stone; they can be addressed as we move on.
Yes, they are an initial set of priorities, and I think you have the ability to reassess those as funds may become available for some of those that are farther out, or ones you thought you could funding for next year, that funding may not be available for some years. So yes, those priorities can be adjusted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? Trustee Anderson.
It's obviously a lot of work going into this, and I'm going to thank everyone that was involved in it, whoever gave me this virus. But I support the majority of this work, but like you say, I look at this as more a blueprint versus a dogmatic document that we will follow this. And I would hope I wouldn't hear from this board that something's going to be planned or looked at, and we come to a meeting and there's already a purchase agreement or whatever, a resolution in place, that there will be some discussion before we move forward in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board?
Yes.
Trustee Joseph,
I
round two.
don't think you had round
No,
one.
that's all right, you can go.
Yeah?
I'm going to bring it up to the public before I,
Okay. I just, in terms of the priority, trustees, Trustee Anderson and Treasurer LaFata hit on something that I thought we talked about a little bit prior to the meeting. I realize 400 is a good sample. What the discussion and I think the feedback you heard is sometimes things get referenced in the master plan as the basis for like it's the equivalent of pre-approval, if you will, and it's really not. This is a starting point. This is the jumping off point based on our best efforts to accumulate data from as many sources, residents, elected officials, township employees, commission members, that it's the best starting point, and it frames a discussion. And that's what I looked at as you put, the initial list of priorities, because really all the good ideas are in some ways relative to what your budget is and what that budget could be used for in other areas. So each one of these, as they come up, have to be deliberated on its own individual merits, and there I think you will see the prioritizing. We have something in the agenda that really speaks to the master plan a little bit later, as one of the residents spoke to. Passing the master plan doesn't make any one of the priorities more, it doesn't move it up the pecking order. It just puts a placeholder on it as a discussion and a starting point. So for me, that's what I saw in the master plan. I think both of the comments, Trustee Anderson, is sometimes, we get to a place, we pass the budget or we pass the master plan, and then plans are made and the reference is, well, it's part of our master plan, and somehow that means it's, got a pre-approval. Really doesn't. This is a starting point, and it was great work. And as we get to heavier expenditures to bring some of the things in the master plan, that's when you will see the real poll, if you will, of the residents. It won't be 441. It could potentially be, very significant turnout if you're talking about real money, and that's typically what drives people out. And it'll be up to the ambassadors of the Parks and Rec program to go out and champion a cause. It'll be up to this board. It's the same conversation that I've had with people at the library about things that they believe are very passionate in and think would be an enhancement to the community. So as those things come out, it will be up to those who are very passionate about it to drive the discussion. And I think you did a great job of framing some things that have been talked about for a number of years. So again, it's great work.
any further comments from the board? Any comments?
Danny.
Oh, Trustee Domingo.
I think it's a concept. It's an idea that we're throwing out there. David, I agree with you on a lot of things. It's not etched in stone. Like I said, we're not going to outspend this $45 million. It's some ideas that have been brought forward by residents that have contributed, from my fellow commission members that are out there. So it's some ideas, and we'll see where it goes, but it's nothing etched in stone. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Any comments from the public? And I'll bring it up one more time. I would like to make a statement. I thank Giffels Webster. Just the professionalism in this whole process has been very easy, transparent, as much input as possible. Although the actual surveys that were filled out seem to be very light, the phone calls that come into, I'm sure, the clerk's office, my office, all the trustees' offices, about street lighting, about our how far we're behind on non-motorized paths and sidewalks, and the calls on the condition of Brandenburg for the last 5 years, and the lack of progress. People are mobile, and they can drive around and see what's happening in other communities, and they ask, why not here? One thing that's a absolute certainty for one of the public comments that was on in the public hearing, without a Parks and Rec plan, there's absolutely zero funding from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for some of these projects that are proposed. There's absolutely zero chance to get some of the funding from SEMCOG through TIP grants and in TAP grants without this plan, which is going to be followed up with our non-motorized path master plan, which is going to have a tremendous amount of income. There's zero chance of getting grants to get a safe way across I-94 and to get a pathway along the Salt River. You look around other communities, they have those, and they have them because they have a vision, they have plans, and they have input. And this sets us on a very, very good path. A couple specific projects were brought up as well. One was the Brandenburg Park shoreline. I'm very, very proud of this board. We had a problem with that shoreline with a fix to re-seawall it of nearly $500,000 and growing. This board unanimously proceeded and approved to participate in a design grant. The project was so attractive to NOAA and the Great Lakes Commission that they funded a very substantial portion of that design, which was $100,000. The design did finish, and it came back to the board about a month and a half ago for implementation. And only then, after public hearings and a lot of discussion over multiple times to spend township resources to soften that shoreline. Now, the grant that was available to us was a fish habitat and a softening shoreline. And I think if you see the renderings and what the project's going to look like, it's going to be fantastic for opening up that. Now, the nice part is we're going to get $1 million grant. And how that happens is with the vision. We got a $0 grant from us for a seawall, and there's also a $0 grant for a beach. So after the fact, that comes up. The next one's Weber Paddle Park. Weber Paddle Park is a success story. I hear over and over again that Weber Paddle Park is a failure. Weber Paddle Park is going to be complete with a property that is donated, and it's going to be an entryway to that Salt River corridor. And if you look up on the map, the emphasis, and I appreciate this plan because the emphasis on this Salt River corridor, we have a very unique opportunity with the Salt River. The development north of the Salt River is Lenox Township, ourself, a little bit of Richmond Township, and a little bit of New Baltimore. So there's not the pollution and the overflow issues there that there are in other rivers. We have a really unique opportunity to do something special with this piece of Salt River. Weber Paddle Park will be the anchor. That project is going to be scaled down. There's a reason why the grant was capped at $300,000, and that is because the Michigan Department of Natural Resources only will grant $300,000 for development. Now, what they will do is grant a heck of a lot more for acquisition, for property purchases. Now, this may change here in a couple of years. So we have an opportunity, and you'll see one down the agenda here very quickly, and another one potentially several meetings from now, to potentially preserve some really high-impact pieces of property. But I did want to touch base on Weber. That's going to be the Weber Paddle Park. All the right-of-way work was done in conjunction with Jefferson. And those are the two projects I think that were brought up besides Veterans Memorial. I think it's pretty clear. I do think that needs a follow-up as well. That's one that gets brought up. The Veterans Memorial Park is located right behind this building, and you see the memorial wall and the howitzer cannon will be moved back there. The Community Center Park, which is I think what we are speaking about, had a commercial baseball field installed not completely on township property. It raised a ton of problems. This board spent a great deal of time solving that issue, and right now discussions are going on, or what do our parks look like into the future? Do they look like community parks like Veterans, where maybe a subdivision can utilize it and enjoy it? I think these parks are very useful and nice. So if you find a way to deal with what to do with this asset, but the input I'm getting from residents is the emphasis on parks like Brandenburg, 17 acres on the lake that has got unbelievable potential in the improvements there that are in motion for this board are warranted. Same thing with Pollard. Pollard Park is a fantastic piece of property that also has the Salt River running through it, with a connection, with an easement connection that the township already owns for some future connection to the master trailsway system of Michigan. So there's a lot touching on this plan. I am very proud of the team. I am very proud of the Leisure Services Department and the entire Parks and Recreation team for their input and the residents. The funding for any of these projects comes back to the board. So the priorities, the 45 million, 50 million, I would make the argument that our community is in need of $200 to $300 million worth of infrastructure. Now, how do you get that infrastructure? You get it with a vision, plans that are professionally done, and you sell it. 23 Mile and 94 might need an $80 million intersection by itself to get a pedestrian crossway there. Well, you get it by having a plan, having a vision, and this starts that. Thank you very much. That's my comments, and I will bring it back up to the board because I'm sure there'll be some rebuttals, and I appreciate Giffels Webster. Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
I have a bunch in the spirit of Christmas. I'm just going to hold on to them because I think they will only bring about more rebuttals, and there's no need to go down this path. It's just not necessary.
We got a lot of agenda items left we can do that with. Motion by Trustee DeMink, support by Trustee Vosburg to adopt Resolution 2019-43, adopting the 2020 through 2024 Chesterfield Township Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. Item 8B, approve a request to partner with Six Rivers Land Conservancy for the acquisition of approximately 33 acres of property located at the end of Hooker Road for a proposed Salt River Nature Center, subject to the Township Legal Counsel approval and final draft of agreement. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Clerk Berry. Support by Supervisor Akavetti. We have Brian and Chris with Six Rivers here, and I think they have a presentation. I'm not sure if you're teed up.
I don't know, we'll send it to you, did you guys have it loaded up?
Oh, we don't, but I think I can here. Just give me 1 second here, and I will tee it up for you.
So while you're doing that, I will take a minute to reintroduce ourselves. I'm Chris Bunch, I'm the Executive Director of Six Rivers Land Conservancy. And with me, I have Brian Marzal, our Land Protection Manager. And by way of introduction, I'm happy to be here to have the opportunity to help you out if you choose to move forward with this. We think it's a great acquisition. We've done several of these types of projects before where we assist local communities in acquiring properties for natural areas and parks, and typically what we do is come in and we reacquire, we will purchase the property, we'll borrow the funding from one of our partners, and then we will hold it while you go through the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant process or other grant processes. And so, of course, the fact that you put a recreation plan in place is critical to being able to do that. The beauty of doing this is by partnering with you guys, we're able to help you secure a piece of property for a significantly less than the full fair market value because we get a grant from the state of Illinois. So what I'm going to do is introduce Brian, who came to us. So Brian started with us in October. He just retired. He was the park director of the city of Austin. Many-year career there, so he's very familiar with everything that you're talking about today. He's also very familiar with acquisitions and working with the trust fund. So what I'm going to do is get out of the way and let Brian talk a little bit about what we are doing.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, trustees, for having us here this evening. experience with that, and I appreciate all the work that went into that. And like you said, Dan, if you have to have that vision in order to get somewhere that you want to go, it's very important. So congratulations on that. So as Chris mentioned, you know, he kind of previewed this. We work in the Six River area, covering 5 counties in southeast Michigan, and to really protect the nature of your youth. And we're working with individuals and organizations such as yourself. Give you a piece of property, and Dan did a nice job of touching on this already. Is at the end of Hooker Road near Callens, just a short distance from Landenberg Park. And our next slide will zoom in a little bit on that for us. Again, right near the school, near Callens Road, and at the end of Hooker Road. And part of that, go ahead, Dan. No, that's perfect. I've been to the site 3 times to walk it, twice kind of by myself, once with our appraiser. And I can say it's a beautiful piece of property. Besides the wooded area, which is really nice, it's got some beautiful wooded areas. The river is really special in this spot. If you want to click through a couple more, Dan, you've got an existing sidewalk that really runs along it. You've got some great views, some great opportunities to engage with that river close to it. There's that existing sidewalk. I work on many non-motorized plans. This makes a great connection from one subdivision to the other and to the school. So there's great potential here. And again, here's a shot of some of that wooded area. I understand this has been an area where a lot of local kids have played for many years. So I think this is an opportunity, again, to preserve most of this area. And I know that your plan is to use the river and the connection along the river walk, that being a priority, but really just going to preserve the rest of the area that's wooded state. Chris mentioned our pre-acquisition and the things that we do to help you with acquiring. We will click through these because I think we've covered these in the past. As Chris mentioned, our specialty is assisting you getting out in front of a developer perhaps and purchasing this property before it is developed so we can assist you in making this a future part. So there are some process requirements that we go through. Chris mentioned our financing. We provided costs, pretty detailed cost estimates for you in your packet. I believe we have those coming up in the next slide or two. And there they are. So really the top section covers the expenses of Six Rivers in purchasing the property, roughly $294,000. There are some expenses associated with that. And then the bottom section covers the purchase of Chesterfield Township from Six Rivers. Some associated expenses with that as well. But that bottom line is 32 acres for roughly $122,000, just shy of $4,000 an acre. So that is after getting that grant funding. So it's a pretty good deal in terms of getting property at a very reasonable price. We want to share that with you. I think that's important for everybody. You've heard about your Parks and Rec master plan. I looked through it myself. This is consistent with your Parks and Rec master plan. Obviously, it's in there. You have a population growth that's expected. Also, the St. Clair, the Salt River and Lake St. Clair and its floodways are important part of the resources here in this area. You need some recreational facilities, as pointed out, in the west and central areas, and you have an active land acquisition program. And it's important while making land is still available. I think having that balance of development and nature and community is really important. I think you have an opportunity to make the land available still in Chesterfield Township to take advantage of it. It's also consistent with the goals of Macomb County, consistent with their current trailways plan and the green Macomb plan that they're working on right now, and also consistent with SEMCOG's goals of supporting conservation and stewardship of natural resources in this area. With that, again, an opportunity for us to partner with you. We're excited about this, and we'll gladly answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the board? Treasurer LaFatta.
Six Rivers guarantees the grant amount for $213,000? No. Well, I'm not done yet. So when we sign on a dotted line, I see there's a document that requires signatures, and we enter this agreement with Six Rivers, then there's really no guarantee that we're going to get $213,000 from the trust fund. Is that correct? Okay. Second of all, if I needed $285,000 and the township already had that in the bank, why would I want to pay 3.5% interest and expense $10,000 when I have that money available? Again, there's no timing involved, and I'm assuming that reading some of this information, and there's a lot of it, that we're going to be responsible from the time we sign on the dotted line for maintenance and upkeep and everything else to Six Rivers that's going to take this on. So if this timeline isn't what it should be, and the time goes on and the grant doesn't materialize, the interest rates could grow, and the cost could snowball and be a lot more than the total township cost of $122,000 from what I'm reading and everything, because there's no guarantee, there's risk involved, and there's no timing set with the grant. So you purchased the property, 3.5% interest, so that's going to keep ongoing until we resolve this whole thing and get a grant in place, I'm assuming. Or the township's going to pull a lot of money out of the bank, more than we're talking about right now, and supposedly going to be approved to reconcile the difference between a grant that's telling us we're going to get plus what we really might get. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah. You want me to respond to something that I'd be glad to. So, the object here is to position you to secure funding that allows you to acquire the property for $122,000 instead of roughly $300,000, which would be your cost if you were to cash it out right now. There is an inherent amount of risk in that you may not get the grant. If you don't get the grant, you can choose to cash the property out the day after and stop the interest payments and stop everything else. You can choose to cash the property out 2 days after we acquire it for you instead of waiting for the grant process. Typically, the way we've done this historically is that we structure the deal so that the loan that we take out is good for up to 3 years. And that allows you to have at least 2 cycles of the Natural Resources Trust Fund. So, Natural Resources Trust Fund grant application is due April 1st of 2020. The decision will be in December of 2020. Typically, the legislature then appropriates funds the following spring, March or April, and so potentially you would close the project in late summer of 2021. So there would be carried interest costs for us holding the property for that period of time. Interest costs that are going to the lender that we borrowed the money from. But the flip side of that is you're getting 75% of the cost of the property from another source. You're getting 75% of the purchase price from the Natural Resources Trust Fund. And so that substantially reduces your acquisition cost. You certainly are free to go cash out the property today or tomorrow if you choose to do that. That's wonderful, and there's nothing more we would like to see on that, because our whole interest is to see there to be more conservation and more public access to natural properties in the region. And this piece on the Salt River is one that we think is a great opportunity and a great priority. So if we can help you do that for substantial savings to the township and to the township residents, we're thrilled to have the opportunity to do it. But if you were to choose to go out and cash the property out tomorrow, you could do that.
But when you say cash the property out, does that mean just put it back on the market and sell it?
If you own it, you can do whatever you want with it. If it's paid for,
Well, that's what I'm saying. When we sign on the bottom line, we're going to basically be responsible for the purchase price of it. And to cash it out, that piece of property's been for sale for a long time because I know the owner of it. So chances of cashing that thing out is going to be slim and none. So I'm assuming that based on, we have a lot of risk. And the longer we drag this out, we're probably looking at property taxes and everything else from year to year, but this bill is going to keep compounding. The longer this timeline drags out, because we don't get the grant, this cost that we're looking at approving today could be a lot more than it is.
It is certainly true that there is some risk that costs will
All right,
go up.
thank you.
But I don't think, I don't think that would stretch beyond a 3-year window, because I presume that you would make a decision that you're going to go ahead and take control of the property. You're going to go ahead and pay us off and take it over. And then you're going to decide what you're going to do with it from there on out. If you wait for the trust fund process to conclude successfully, then obviously you're using a significant amount of funding from an outside source to offset those costs. So, yeah, there's some risk inherent.
If I'll chime in, then I'm going to go to some of the other board members. This was in front of the board, I believe I brought it in September. We discussed it in closed session at that time. And I've had multiple conversations throughout the last couple of months and beyond. Paul, our Treasurer LaFata, I think you did nail it pretty well, and I think the explanation was pretty well. The first decision this board really has to make is if we're interested in preserving that 33 acres at the end of Hooker Road and Salt River with approximately 1,500 foot of Salt River frontage and access as a open space, nature center, a potential perpetual recreational area for our township. That's kind of like the first decision, and I think we discussed that at the meeting several months back. And at that time, I thought there was some pretty general support on the concept. Now, the details, we work out as we go, and Bob Siebert did review this, and if there's some details that need to be changed in the agreement or some of the payment terms, that's the purpose of this board to do it. But item number one is, do we think that owning that piece and preserving it, there is a pretty substantially sized subdivision platted on that piece. It does have some development difficulties, but it could very well end up being developed. And we just don't have a whole lot of pieces on the Salt River that can be preserved into perpetuity, and that was the nature of the discussion months ago and the nature of the discussion here today. Trustee Joseph.
So thank you. The concept idea is great. I mean, it really is a wonderfully thought-out idea, and it has a lot of very future-focused. I get it, and I appreciated not only the presentation, but the plan and concept. This is the area that I think we are right at when Mr. Arroyo was presenting our master plan, and you lay out some vision and some ideas. We have about, last count, 5 or 6 very good projects that we can't close the loop on right now. And so when you're talking about taking resources and putting it into another future-focused idea, I don't think you do that from a limitless vat of resources. So if you have competing interests, you have to make decisions about what does this do in relationship to some of the other projects. So I don't think, if you don't have a kayak launching from the paddle park, you don't have a successful paddle park. You have a good concept, but we don't have any kayaks launching from the Weber paddle park. It's not a success until we do that. And we're talking about something, down the road. This is, it is a good idea, and it does have some merit, and I think the residents of Chesterfield 2030 probably will benefit from this, but there are some residents in 2020 that would like to launch a kayak from Weber Paddle Park. To me, you have to look at the resources that we have and what we would do to take resources away. Talking to our Parks and Rec Director, Willard, and hearing her describe parents coming in to power wash the youth center so that the kids can go into a building that isn't just filled with cobwebs and debris, it's a tragedy. So I don't know how you take $250,000 plus, put it somewhere else for the residents of 2030. This is again, it's a great concept, and I see the layout, but it's in direct opposition to some of the projects that we have going on right now. We have a lot of we have a lot of great plans in the township, but a plan without real action is not a plan at all. It's a speech. We do a lot of talking about plans. We don't have actions that really bring it to the residents. Weber Paddle Park is a perfect example of that. It's not a success. You can call it whatever you want, but it's really just a debate. Until you're launching kayaks, you can't call it a success. To me, this idea is exactly that. It's a great idea. It is a great goal, but it lacks the ability to bring it to fruition, and then it just sits like a lot of other unfulfilled projects. We have our cup runneth over with projects that we could really come together, work on, and get to our residents this year. And we get I don't want to see this dive into like name calling and all that, but I really think we have enough on our plate to develop with the current portfolio of projects, that we could take this money, put it directly into any number of half a dozen projects, deliver it to our residents tomorrow. It really doesn't put me at odds with the idea of owning a piece of the Salt River and all these other things, but it does put me at odds when you make that comparison and then you say, well, what about Weber Paddle Park? What would we do with the money that you could do to Weber Paddle Park? What would you do with the money to improve the existing campers that go into a youth center that's far outlived its usefulness? And to me, this is a competing interest with that, and therefore it's not a viable project for me because of the timeliness of it. So I think it takes needed resources that could be applied elsewhere, and for that reason, not the concept. I'm not in favor of it.
I do believe most of those comments were directed at myself, and I will address Weber Paddle Park again. It is a tremendous success for our community because we're almost at the finish line. And we've had a tremendously expensive piece of property donated to the township, and we've been awarded a $265,000 DNR trust fund grant. That in and of itself is a $500,000 that other entities believed in Chesterfield to make this happen. Now we got to get it over the finish line. And the finish line is getting it constructed, which we can now do now that the approaches are in and the right-of-ways are in and the path is connected and the bridge is complete. This project I expect to be built and running into early summer and ready to use. Now, the only way that project goes bad is if this board makes it go bad with their actions. And I know there's been a tremendous amount of effort from members of this board to either derail, stop, or not build that project. But it is slated to be built and ready to enjoy this year, and with primarily being funded by the state and a very generous donor. So that's why it's a success. We obviously got to get it over the finish line. The decision, like I said, is if this board thinks it is if this piece of property is something that you feel is worth preserving. There is some risk, Treasurer LaFata, and the risk is if we do not get a DNR trust fund grant, then we have to pay for the entire piece of property. However, the hedge to that risk is if we don't get a DNR trust fund grant for 75 to 85% of the property, you don't have an environmental easement on the property, and hence it can be marketed and offloaded at that time. So that risk is very, very mitigated. The conversation about the rec center and the youth center, it was very contentious at our budget meeting, and I would urge anyone who's watching to watch that discussion as well. There's a book of one-pagers, visions of every concept and idea, not everyone, because there's many, many more, that have price tags associated with them and potential years of of when they're constructed for infrastructure projects, water and sewer. And the rec center's up right on that list. And you'll see in the 2020 budget, it's my expectations that in 2020, we have a plan. 2021, we start construction on a rec center. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We are on a trajectory now as a township that can handle some investments in our parks and some enhancements to our parks. And this is one that was brought to me from multiple residents, multiple concerns. And I would like you to touch base, if you could, Mr. Bunch, on the leasing back immediately and the utilizing of this parcel. One thing that is pretty appealing with this is, yes, it is on the market, and it has been for a couple of years, maybe a year or coming up on a year. But it won't always be on the market, and we won't always have the opportunity to preserve it. So here we are, this board can make the decision if we want to preserve it. Now, the final details, I am asking, the request is for conditional approval based on Attorney Siebert's, making sure the contract's got all the I's and is all up to snuff from a legal standpoint, and we can even discuss details. Putting more money down, we are in a financially strong position. We could put more money down. The key is, if we purchase it outright, the DNR trust fund option is completely off the table. And I will say this, spending 6 years in Lansing, it really bugged me when I was up there that the DNR trust fund grant, which is a pot of funds that comes from oil and gas reserves, that money going to the northern part of Michigan and that money going to the UP up in northern Michigan and not Macomb County annoyed me then. And we're just as entitled to those funds as anyone else. And I'm encouraged. I think you're working with some other neighboring communities on these, and this is exactly what it's for. And ultimately, it's up to the board if it's something that you think that we should own. Chris, if you could answer the question on the leasing back and the utilizing of this property virtually immediately.
Yeah, let me just pick up where you left off. And again, our goal, we have two interests in this. One is a conservation organization. We believe that natural areas, natural lands are very important. And we also believe that public access to them is very, very important. There's 8 million acres of public land in Michigan and only 200,000 of it down here for all the people. So, just as you can see from looking at your aerial photos, there's a tremendous amount of development pressure and build out is going to happen. I use actually one of your neighboring communities in my presentations. I show aerial photos from 1961 all the way through 2015, and people look at that and they go, oh, now I know why you do what you do, because everything is paved. So I think, you've got a real opportunity here, and as time goes by, things get more and more expensive. So on behalf of Six Rivers, we think this is an important and a great opportunity. As an organization that is here to lend assistance, the decision is up to you guys, and I certainly understand the competing priorities, and all we really want to do is be helpful. So if we can help create and preserve your eligibility to get some of those trust fund dollars, that's what we want to do, and that's what we're here for. And if you choose not to, that's fine. We get that. We understand that. So, as Supervisor Accavetti said, if you guys purchase the property outright, then you are no longer eligible for trust fund dollars. And so that's the reason that we would acquire it and hold it. And we are happy to lease it back to you for $1 a month or for, I don't know, $275,000. If the purchase price is $276,000, and then we would just put the $275,000 for the mortgage. So, we could figure out a way to make this work so that we could knock the wings off the interest payments. But we continue to hold title to it, and therefore you are still eligible to get trust fund dollars. We are happy to be creative and figure out how to make this thing even more attractive and more functional for you guys. But that, that gets to the place where you've got to make a decision to move forward. So, again, we are here at your pleasure and here to do whatever we can to help you out. And yes, the relationship between us says that, while we own the property, because you guys ultimately are going to be the owner, because you're the beneficiaries, you will cover the cost of our ownership. We don't expect the cost of our ownership
ownership to be much. We don't expect it to be anything. If you want to operate it as a park, if you want to go in there and pave a trail or do some other things to it, if you want to lease it from us and do that, you're welcome to do that. Those are costs that you're going to incur anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference at all.
Thank you. I think I got a bunch of people in the queue here, but I'm going to start with the ones that haven't spoken. Trustee Domingue.
Question to the gentleman from Six Rivers. How many of these have you done, these type of land acquisitions?
We're in the middle of our fourth one right now. This would be our fifth, and there's 3 others in the wings.
So you've done 3 already. How many have you got funding approved for?
2 out of 3 have been funded. The third one was just not funded last week, and so we're going to reboot and reapply.
Why was that not refunded, if you could ask?
Because it didn't score high enough, and because they didn't make enough money available, and it didn't score high enough. So it is a competitive grant program. So your grant application has to score, and then it depends upon how much money is available in a funding cycle. So this year they made $11.5 million available for acquisitions, and $11.5 million available for development projects. And they got about a third of the way down through the acquisition list, and our project was a little bit further down than that. In past years, last year, I believe they funded almost the entire acquisition list. And the 2 years previous to that, they funded the whole thing. Some of this all relates to the funding formula. The Constitution requires that the trust fund spend not less than 25% on acquisition and not more than 25% on development. There's a lot more pressure for development grants. Typically what they do is they make more money available, which lets them get higher down the development scale. So this year, they only went so far up that scale.
You've done 3, 2 have gotten through, this is your 4th one.
Trustee Vosburg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I support this because I do think that without a vision for the future, Chesterfield's just going to just sit there. We're just going to sit here, and I think we need to have that vision. We have short-term vision, middle, and long-term vision. We need to have this, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to try to finance this in a creative way so that we can get a larger number from the state. But if we have to, I'd be willing to pay the whole thing. I think it's that worthwhile of a project. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to round 2 with this, I'm going to bring it up to the public. I think we do have a public individual willing to speak or wishing to speak.
Good evening, Gary Enterlich, 52624 Laurel Oak Lane in Chesterfield. I've lived in Chesterfield and New Walter all my life, more than 60 years. I wanted to give you a little insight on this property, and I think the township should move forward to acquire it. Just by way of background, in your discussion earlier tonight, you talked about Brandenburg Park. 2 gentlemen in Baltimore owned the majority of that land, Walter DeJarlis and Leonard Burgess. The township had a vision then to acquire it. If they didn't acquire it from those gentlemen through the DNR, you wouldn't have it today, because somebody would have turned it into a portion of Lottie View. The Ametas developed Lottie View. When they did the last phase, they had to devote through a conservation easement some of their property on the Salt River. That's downstream from this piece. I have kind of a unique experience and perspective on life. My parents owned a funeral home. I worked there, junior high, high school, college, law school. So you've met a lot of people in this community. I knew Harry Fuller through that. And I also knew him as an attorney because his office was in Mount Clemens, right next to me. When he died, he left that 32 acres to St. Joseph's Hospital because his wife predeceased him and I don't think he had any children. The hospital owned it for a long period of time. There was a group that was going to develop secluded woods in Brandenburg, and not this piece. They needed an outlet for their storm sewer. Pulte's built the Embassy subdivision. I lived there for 11 years. My wife and I and the kids, we'd walk to the end of the street. In my lifetime, I skated the whole length of the river from the mouth to 24 Mile Road. I cross-country skied it. You don't want to do it at night because the snowmobilers will run you over. And several times I have a 16-foot aluminum. I've taken that boat almost to 24 Mile Road. You can't go as far now because the Salt River is in a state of disrepair, and a lot of the golf course and a lot of their trees have fallen into the river. But if you take a kayak or a small boat, and you start at the lake, and you go up into the golf course, when you go by this piece, the piece that Niemetas had, and the other parts along there, you see deer, you see geese, you see turtles, you see all kinds of natural, environmental aspects to life. When Secluded Woods in Brandenburg was going to be built, the previous people that were going to do it had obtained an easement from the hospital to put their storm sewer through the hospital piece at the back end of the Bellefonte subdivision that Pulte's built. They were to pay $10,000 to the hospital foundation. The easement was put in escrow at Greco. They never got the money. Construction started for Secluded Woods in Brandenburg. The pipe's in the ground. It comes to light that, hey, there was supposed to be this easement. Where is it? It was at Greco. The developers paid the $10,000. It was recorded. And then Village Development sued everybody over the pipe, alleging the trespass. It was resolved. The township was represented through their insurance carrier. I represented one of the developers directly and the other one indirectly. And the resolution was to lay out a subdivision for village builders on that piece. It never got built. That group lost it. They gave a deed in lieu of foreclosure back to the bank. And the bank eventually sold it to Paul Rogers and his wife. They're now the title owners, as I understand it. They're willing to sell it, to me at a reasonable price. Even if it's at $275,000, it's like $10,000 an acre. When you look at the survey that was submitted in your packet, it shows 5 parcels because at one time there was a house on parcel number 4. When the development started 13 years ago, that was taken down. There was a house on parcel number 5. Harry Fuller's house sat basically where it says Kalen's Road, 66-foot right of way. That house disappeared by a mysterious fire after he died. The bridge used to be at the end of Booker. It got rerouted. I had a conversation with JR a few weeks ago. There's a sanitary sewer that runs through it, not in a straight line. It zigzags because Harry Fuller laid out a subdivision for that piece because he was a registered surveyor. So when Pulte brought the sewer up from Hooker, he gave an easement in the township for the water and sewer based on his proposed development. But my point is that that's the background. Whenever you acquire real estate, there's always some risk. But if you don't acquire it now, you'll probably never get it for the township's use and the general public's use. And so I would urge you to go through this program. Now, the treasurer indicated, well, if you have the money, you can just take it out of your treasury account and pay it on a cash deal. But then you lose the eligibility and the probabilities of getting the money back. 25 years ago, I was involved in a similar situation with the land grant thing from the state. And the day before a court hearing, the DNR representative came to my office and gave me $1, because I represented the sellers, to sell the property, 400+ acres on Harson's Island, to the state. But it was going to be subject to like a year and a half of funding, because these gentlemen described the funding process, as did Mr. Agavati, it takes forever and a day to get the grant approved. You have a good probability of getting it approved, but this group helps facilitate the funding. Because in that situation on Parsons, because of the long delay, the private property owners just said, we're going to sell it to a private entity. Because we don't want to wait a year or 18 months to get our money. And so this group, and I think they just recently did one in Baltimore, right, on M29, because there are signs there in an effort to preserve a wooded area in close proximity to the lake. So if you don't get it now, just like the people 40 plus years ago, when they got Brandenburg, if they didn't act then, you wouldn't have it. In Brandenburg, it's one of the nicest parks, municipal parks along the lake. The same way here. Now, the Webbers, they gave the community money to buy that land, which was the Salt River Farms Marina. And it's taken time to develop it. But part of the delay, as I understand it, is because we all knew, or people that were informed, that they were going to rebuild the bridge at the Salt River. And there was no sense starting that program until that bridge construction was done. And by not doing it, it also gave the contractors a place to facilitate their construction activities. And obviously, if the township buys it, it comes off the tax rolls. But whether you're 15 or 55 or 65, it'll be a place that will be used by the community. And you don't have to pave everything there. You can use gravel. The bike path was put in when I lived on Embassy because there was a grant from the state. The village of East Harbor was considered low-income housing, and it qualified the township to get the money. And it was put in where Callens Road used to be. When I lived on Embassy, one night, probably about 1980, I came home, the road commission's there with 4 dump trucks, and dumped dirt across Callens Road because Mr. Fuller owned the road. They closed it down, and then eventually they put the path through. And a lot of people on Embassy in that area used the bike path a lot. It was paved. It's kind of like, I think, died off a little bit because some fences were put up. And in 2014, I had a conversation with Mr. Hoffer, the head of the road department, about updating things over there, and they were willing to do that on behalf of Mr. Rogers when he acquired the property, but then he never developed. So I urge you, you have to consider the risk, but I think it's a risk well worth taking. And if you don't get it now, you'll probably never get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
I agree with Mr. Yodelik. Property should be taken, yeah. My concern is basically when you look at getting the property, now the other thing is it had a priority. The priority of putting in the boardwalks, everything else that they want to do in there, have to happen when you buy the property. Because that's where your funds are going to go. And that was my concern with the other one, the Weber Fire Department. And they're saying it didn't get done because of bid. There were other reasons that it didn't get done. Let's be honest about it. The money spent that didn't have to be spent. Contracts put out there that shouldn't have been put out. A lot of things there. But if you buy this property, I think it's a good deal. But just be aware that if you do it, let's not plan on taking all the money from every place else that needs funding and maybe just put it in this and let everything else go to hell. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Proud of it once again. I just thought I'd share a success story with this particular Six Rivers client that we work with in Casco Township, St. Clair County. We did a Parks and Rec plan. Casco was interested in developing the very first township park. We partnered with Six Rivers. Six Rivers came and acquired that. And then we wrote the grant application to the DNR and got it successfully funded. We just recently
Thank you. Any further public comment? Back up to the board. I think everyone has spoken except for Trustee Anderson. Trustee Anderson.
Yes, sir, I had multiple comments, but Mr. Joseph's hit some of them, Mr. LaFata, and I mean, I look at the agreement here in our packet, page 155, the closing on the sale of this property. The closing shall take place at location agreed upon the parties on or before December 31st, 2021. We got a year to do it. I don't know. Did you, when you were looking at this price, were you able to negotiate with the seller, with the lady there? Get it down a little more, and she was asking?
Yeah, that's actually below what they had it listed for, and appraisal is underway right now. Anything that is going to be funded by the trust fund requires an appraisal that meets the trust fund standards, and those are extremely high standards. Almost.
Yeah. I know that piece of property, like everyone says, would be a great natural pond or park, something like that, but it's been on the market quite a while, and to develop it, you're the experts on developing subdivision there, but I too know one of the former owners, and part of his plan, or one of his thoughts, or when he purchased it, if a developer did want to come in there and put a subdivision in, they'd probably have to purchase that house on Callens, which would double or quadruple the price of that property at a very minimum to put it in. So the viability or the concern about subdivision going in there, I mean, we should take that into consideration too. I don't know, I'm not completely sold on it because you gentlemen are doing your work, but if anything goes south, the township's left holding a $300,000 piece of property, which I think even if you had a subdivision in there, the DNR is not going to let them, do much damage to our mighty Salt River there. There's going to be some kind of protections in place, but I really question the purchase at this time, especially with the other things that we have going on in this township. That we've talked about it tonight. Other members have talked about them, and I'll just let it go right there.
Treasurer LaFata.
I mentioned, and you agreed that there's some risk. Program management concept, when you go into any project or any development, is you identify all the risks up front before you move forward. And you put something in place to identify the costs for these risks. And the next thing you do is try and find out how you're going to either mitigate them, transfer them to somebody else, or accept the risks. And right now, we have numbers on a piece of paper that don't have any risk. So if I understand the vision part and I understand trying to get this piece of property, but I'd really like to see a piece of paper identifying all the risks, if there's a cost to these risks, and how we're going to work through it when we go through the project to see if we can mitigate it, transfer it to somebody else, or accept it, which means accept the cost. Because right now, this piece of paper doesn't have any risk. I understand the vision of getting the property, but right now I got a piece of paper that's asking for an approval for an amount that we don't know it's real right now. And I'd like to see somebody go through the risk process, identify if there's cost to it, and come back to the board for an approval for a real number. And I understand the vision, but I don't know why the decision has to be made tonight, understanding that there is risk, understanding that there's cost to the risk. Thank you.
Any further board comments? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I think we've heard, kind of plowed some of the same ground. At the end of the day, and I appreciated Mr. Gendernalik, he's got great perspective, and he's not only is he a longtime resident, but he's very active, was very active in our planning, and has represented a number of clients on a number of different properties. So his perspective is very much appreciated. With that said, there's no debate that there is some speculation that has to be done. There's a risk that has to be taken. There's risk in getting the grant. There's speculation in terms of the market, and the concern that I have is we don't close projects out. We have a number of projects that have been horribly mismanaged. There's no sense debating them over and over, but when a guy donates a significant amount of money to put in a paddle park, and you're, roughly 3 years out from that, there's no kayak in there. And this idea that the Salt River Bridge was the delay was exactly the opposite of what we were told by the engineers at the time, that this was compatible with all of the plans that we wouldn't have to duplicate work. And the idea of it going out for engineering, it went out, came back, and it was so off the charts in terms of what we were told it would cost.
Try to keep it on this agenda item, which is the potential.
I am.
We're
I
not
thought you
talking about
addressed
Weber.
this as well. I thought you addressed this as well, so no latitude here, just when you speak, but that's fine.
Do the best you can.
Thank you. The difficulty that we have in closing projects is what causes me apprehensions about this project. And I think the comments that we heard from residents and fellow board members talking about an opportunity for the future of the township. But again, we have a lot of vision. We have poor planning. We have an inability to close projects. And so when you tie up this amount of money, when we have existing projects that desperately need it, it's not walking and chewing gum. It's taking from one for a vision. And I'm a visionary as well. But until you start closing projects, you're just acquiring wishes. And the 42-pager that you encourage people to look at, I looked at it. I took it to Santa, because that's the amount of possibility we have in accomplishing some of those. I'd like to put our collective energies into closing some loops and bringing some parks and recreation value to the existing residents, the people that we have now, because we do this and we tie up $300,000 for something that we could put into a project right now. That's to me, it's competing interest. It's not something that I would venture in. I'm not going to speculate and gamble with the residents' money. It's just it's a risk that I don't think, based on our inability to close out projects and effectively manage projects, that it's advisable. So that's my reason for opposition.
Thank you. I hate to keep prolonging this, but I've got to respond to a couple of these comments. I wholeheartedly agree that the township had trouble closing out projects, especially from the period of 2010-ish till 2016.
Can we stay on the focus? I want you to, point of order, I'd like you to stay on focus.
You want to chair the meeting? I know you're working on that, so.
No, just stay on focus.
We had
That's
trouble
all.
closing out projects from prior to 2016. Now, since then, you look at a memorial wall that sat there for half a decade, that's done. Brandenburg Park, funding's in place. Weber Park, we be starting construction this year. So yes, none of that, SAD projects that we've never had, or re-gravel project that we've never had, starting to expand our non-road motorized paths. So I actually agree with you that that period of time, not only did you not close projects, you didn't start them. This basically just comes down to, does this board think it's worthwhile to preserve that piece of property for generations to come? So we got some new faces in the audience. You probably are shocked with our behavior up here, but this is the normal operating procedure for the last year of how we get things done, and frankly, I'm fed up with it.
And that's on the agenda? Is that on the agenda? Is why you're speaking on that?
Would you like to speak some more? I could stay and do this all night if you want
How long we're
to.
going to give you lecture? Just call the question. It's just.
I'm enjoying myself, Trustee
I
Joseph.
can see that, but I don't think these people want to listen to you lecture me.
Are there any more? Are there any more? I think this is a very important discussion and a very important piece of property that we could preserve for generations to come. I want to make sure there's no more comments. Is there any more board comments? Treasurer LaFata. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. I'm going to go to Clerk Berry because she has not had the opportunity to speak yet.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about opportunities, threats, risks, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, who has vision, who doesn't have vision, what kind of vision we want to see. In the case of this property, and the reason why I made the motion to approve, is because I believe that this is an opportunity that may have a window that will close on us and we will not be able to take advantage of it. And I believe that this particular parcel, when you look at it in relation to some of the other assets and some of the other opportunities, that it is important that we secure it. We have an opportunity to do that now. We have an opportunity to do it with I believe, probably the lowest cost that we are going to have on it. And while there are some risks, I believe that they are able to be mitigated. And I think the greater risk, and we talk a lot about, big money, big dollars, big numbers, and they are. But relatively speaking, we throw that money around here all the time. It's not unusual. I mean, we spend money, a couple $100,000 on various projects all the time. I'm sensitive to the concerns, but I think the greater risk here is losing the opportunity to secure this property for our current residents and our future residents. So I believe that the benefits of acquiring this particular parcel far outweigh any of the risks. And while I agree that we need to proceed prudently and proceed in a way in which is responsible, I believe to miss the opportunity on this does a disservice, not only to our residents today, but our residents in the future. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Treasurer LaFata.
I still understand the vision part of it, but what I don't understand is we don't really want to identify the true business plan that I call a business plan, which means that you take the risk, and if it takes longer than a year, the interest isn't going to be $10,000, it's going to be $10,000 plus. There's a lot of elements in here that need to be managed, and those elements, if they fail, are going to cost the township dollars. And I don't understand why we can't table this until the next board meeting or for a few weeks to identify really what the township's getting into. And yes, the township spends hundreds of thousands of dollars of residents' tax dollars, but it should be done efficiently, and it should be done so knowledge of what we're going to spend up front, not somebody coming down in 2 or 3 months from now or 6 months from now and saying, we have a scope change, we need to throw in another $125,000. If you look at the Weber Paddle Park and you look at that picture that was up there that Supervisor Accavetti put up there, based on the current engineering concept, which is the same one as the AEW concept design that was released for the bids, it came in at $986,000, $1.2 million, and $1.4 million. And that's a holdup more than anything else, more than the new bridge over Jefferson, because right now we don't have a concept to fit the current grant we've got from the state. So that's going to be the major holdup, because we don't have the funding to match the concept that we have right now, nor do we have a grant that has been adjusted, because the grant requirements include all of the elements that were in the bid process. So there's a lot going on. It's just not the bridge. But I don't know why we can't table this, identify it, put a good work plan together, and then move forward. Nobody's going to sell that property in a month from now. And I just don't understand. We want to rush in a hurry all the time. We pass a rec plan, and the next thing on the agenda is let's spend some money. And we don't really put a lot of thought into it. And that's why our projects don't get closed out, and that's why most of them have scope changes and over expenditures. Thank you.
Thank you. I hate to have to do this again, but the Weber Paddle Park keeps getting brought up. If we had any kind of relationship up here with a fraction of this board and the rest of us and the rest of the department heads, you would know that the plan for the Weber Paddle Park, Weber Paddle Park, you're basically looking at right there, which is a scaled back version of the plan to meet, to get us within the funding parameters. I'm actually appalled by the rushing this through. I think it was September we talked about this as a board. October, November, December. This has been ongoing with Six Rivers. You actually presented to the board, I believe, 6 months ago on this exact concept. And this happens to be a piece. They talked about using their services to protect and preserve properties within our township that met the parameters of this piece. And this is just one that happens to be on the market. This is one that happens to get the attention of the state, and we got to deal with this shenanigans up here over and over and over again. This is a very simple question. Does this board feel like preserving that 33 acres of land in nearly 2,000 feet of Salt River frontage for generations to come in Chesterfield is a good idea? Now, the details of the contract, that's why the end of it was contingent on attorney approval of the contract. Now you discuss about the contract. So that's the concept, that's the idea, and I will continue to talk about this all night because I think it's very important to not only be known for what we're going to build.
Point of order, Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to.
No.
No, there's a point of order. I'd like to call the question, motion to call the question.
You're not recognized. It's important to not
It
only
is
be
a point
noted,
of order. What
it's
are you
important to
talking
not
about?
be, only be.
Nobody wants to hear you drone on. The motion is to call the question.
You are not recognized.
You got 4
You are-
votes, call it.
You are not
It's
recognized.
done. We
You are
get
not
it.
recognized.
Get it, we got it, we got it.
You're not recognized.
Excellent.
Okay. It's important to be known for not only what you build, but what you don't destroy, and this is an opportunity for something that we don't destroy.
Bravo.
Any further
Motion to
comment?
call the question.
Motion to call the question by trustee Joseph. Is there support?
Support.
Motion to call the question by trustee Joseph, support by trustee Anderson. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg. Aye. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Echeverry.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8B, approve a request to partner with Six Rivers Land Conservancy for the acquisition of approximately 33 acres of property located at the end of Hooker Road for a proposed Salt River Nature Center, subject to Township legal council approval of final draft of agreement. The motion was made by Clerk Berry and supported by by Supervisor Echeverry. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Echeverry.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
No.
Motion passes. Thank you so much,
It's a done deal.
and we look forward to working with you. Item 8C, adopt Resolution 2019-45, a resolution opposing the construction of a nuclear waste repository in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by trustee Vosburg.
Second.
Support by Clerk Berry. Discussion. I think the motion speaks for itself. I think it was, Treasurer LaFata.
Back in May of 2015, when this became an issue originally, I came to the Township Board and I asked for the same thing that we're doing right now, and it only took 4.5 years for somebody to do it. I was so frustrated back then, I even wrote a letter to the editor, an Anchor Bay Voice, and I said that not only should the township write a resolution, which most of the township did back in 2015, but we should even contact our president and our Governor Snyder at the time to see what they could do. Canada is really not friendly to the United States. I've done business with them. I've traveled back and forth over the bridge, and more goods and services come from out of Canada into the United States than Canada gets from imports from the United States. In 2014, it was like $34 billion worth. Plus, Canadian residents, there's about 200,000 of them living in the U.S., not that many U.S. citizens working in Canada. I think a while back, I asked GFL for a hand to see if they could do something with their government in this, and GFL didn't even know that this was happening in their own country, a Canadian company. So, I support this resolution, but I tried to make this happen over 4.5 years ago, and it didn't seem to budge. So I'm kind of wondering why, at this point in time, all of a sudden this resolution popped up. The other thing is besides the resolution, we might want to contact the 14 politicians in the state of Michigan that decided that the F-35As should be stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base for their help, since they've been helping with the sustainability study and the want to have F-35s here, they might be of some help. You might want to contact them. I have a list of names if you'd like to have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? I do believe that question was directed at me.
Not everything is. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Just a clarification, if I may, in the resolution. The senator that trustee referenced, there were a number of them. Senator Pete Lucido is who I think we're talking about, not Phil Lucido. So just a friendly amendment to correct that typo.
Absolutely. Clerk's office will note. I do believe the question on timing was aimed at myself.
Oh, sorry.
Because you all done, Trustee Joseph?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Because I did submit the agenda item. The timing was now because the issue it came back up again. We did discuss this several years ago as a board, and I was expecting Treasurer LaFata to actually introduce a resolution similar to this 3-4 years ago. The timing of it is, I thought it would be something that could unify us, even if it's for 15, 20 seconds up here, or maybe a couple minutes if we could drag it out. I don't believe that disposing of low-level or high-level, which is the newest news with the dump up near Lake Huron, belongs in the Great Lakes River Basin. We have 20% of the world's fresh water supply. Yes, we have got to safely remove, all countries do, their nuclear waste. It's just in that basin does not sit well with me or I don't believe it sits with our residents. So the timing was because I was really expecting Treasurer LaFata to draft this himself and submit it, and I saw another opportunity with the high-level waste being proposed to be there. So, any further comments? Motion by Trustee Vosburg, support by Clerk Berry to approve or to adopt Resolution 2019-45, opposing the construction of a nuclear waste repository in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye. 8D, set a public hearing for Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, to hear comments concerning the allocation of 2020 Community Development Grant block
Move to
grants.
approve.
Motion by Trustee Vosburg. I'll open this. Hold up 1 second. Motion by Trustee Vosburg. Do I have support?
Second.
Support by Clerk Berry. Go.
We just have to say.
I've been having trouble hearing what you're saying. Mainly you, sometimes this into, I don't know. I check with your people around me, they're the same way. You better have a sound check, system check, or whatever it is, but have a hard time understanding what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any further comments from the public? Any comments from the board? Motion by Trustee Vosburg, support by Clerk Berry to approve item 8D as read. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye. Item 8E, approve ratification of a 3-year labor agreement for 2020 through 2022 between Chesterfield Township Police Officers Council, part-time firefighters, as tentatively agreed to by the parties and ratified by POLC part-time firefighter membership on November 19th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Anderson, support by Trustee Vosburg. Questions? Comments from the board? Comments from the public? This is these have been in front of us time and time again, and I think you did a good job. Director Duchesne is here if there's any comments or questions from the board. Clerk Berry.
The only comment I would like to make is that I appreciate all of the work that's gone into having all of these labor agreements brought to the board for our consideration, and I would only hope that those labor organizations that perhaps have not been as cooperative would follow the lead of those who have, and that we would see all of our labor contracts completed in a timely fashion and in such a, I think, mutually beneficial manner as this one. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Motion by Trustee Anderson, support by trustee Vosburg to approve item 8E as read. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Echevetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. Next, another one for Director Duchesne. 8F, approval of the attached two-year employment agreement for Dean Bob, assessor, for the period of January 1, 2020 through December 31st, 2021, as recommended by the Human Resources Department. The current two-year agreement expires December 31st, 2019.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by trustee Demink, support by trustee Anderson. Comments from the board? Trustee Vosburg.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that Dean Babb does for our township and look forward to another 2 years with him.
Any further comments from the board? From the public? Motion by trustee Demink, support by trustee Anderson to approve item 8F as read. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Echevetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. 8G, approve a recommendation by the copy machine QBS team to sign a 48-month lease agreement with Xerox for 7 Altalink C804S color multifunction copy machines at a monthly cost of $120 per machine, or $1,550.40 yearly lease per machine, including a maintenance plan and all consumables per unit, plus an additional per-page charge at a fixed rate of .0069 for black and white and .0483 for color copies. I gotta make sure the next QBS team makes the recommendation short. Do I have a
Move to
motion?
approve.
Motion by trustee DeVig,
Support.
support by trustee Vosburg. Discussion. I do believe there are a couple members on the board that were on that QBS team. Clerk Berry and Treasurer LaFata, if you do have questions.
Actually, this is the first time I've seen an apples-to-apples quote put together. 4 different suppliers. Xerox did come in lower. There was just one request by Clerk Berry to try and trial the machines. That request was put out to both Xerox and Ricoh. Neither one of them could provide machines on the premise here for trial. We'd have to send our delegates to Southfield. None of the machines could be trialed next to one another. The current copy machines at DPW are not functioning. The clerk's office machines are on loan. And actually, Xerox is the best. They'll take away the old machines. We looked at the difference between leasing and buying. We lease, everything's covered for the period of the lease, including expendables. If we buy, after 2 years, we're responsible for maintenance and expendables. So actually, leasing from Xerox is the best quote we've gotten for the new machines. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer LaFata. Any questions for the board, for the team? Motion by trustee DeBank, support by trustee Vosburg to approve item 8G as submitted. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Demink.
Aye, but I
Trustee-
didn't support it.
I did.
Oh,
Treasurer LaFata did.
okay, motion by trustee Vosburg, support by treasurer LaFata?
No, LaFata, supported by me.
Okay, motion by LaFata, supported by Vosburg.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Supervisor Echevetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. 8H, approve a recommendation by Public Works to use the services of HRC, Hubbard and Clark, to complete a water and sewer connection fee study at a total cost of $19,920. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Support.
Motion by trustee Vosburg, support by treasurer LaFata. Director Coddington is here, and if you have any questions on what this water and sewer connection fee study is.
Good evening. We put together a QBS team for this. First of all, I want
want to say that it's been a long time since the water and sewer connection fees have been looked at. And we want to make sure that we're in line and everything is clear and fair and defensible. So we really think we needed to look at this. So we put together a QBS team that consisted of myself, Kevin Johnson, Engineer Mitch O'Connor, Director Steve Duchesne, Treasurer LaFata, Ellen Clark, and Vicki from accounting. So we interviewed, we sent it out. We got numbers back from two. They were sealed bids. We did not look at the number parts until we interviewed the companies. They were nice enough to come back and interview for us. Both interviews went very well. Both companies are very capable of doing the study for us. And so we rated everything on both companies. And QBS team, before we opened the prices, we decided that, well, the money was part of it, but after opening that, we decided that Hubble, Roth, and Clark are more than capable of doing this for us. And with that, we're asking for the board's recommendation to follow through, and we'd like to move forward with this study.
Any comments or questions from the board? I do think this is an important first part of our water and sewer fee, very detailed discussion. And in the firm, I'm very comfortable with. Motion by Trustee Vosburg, support by Treasurer LaFata to approve item 8H as submitted. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosburg. Aye. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMay.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Thank you. Item 8I, approve a recommendation by Public Works to purchase a floor scrubber from Morrison Industrial Floor Cleaning Equipment at a total cost of $19,578 from GL 901-000-140. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Trustee Vosburg.
Support.
Support by Trustee DeMink. Director Coddington, you might want to give this one an explanation.
Okay, our garage on the end of our DPW building is about 30,000 square feet. It's hard to keep the floor clean in there. The machine we do have, it's been there since the day we moved in there, and she simply wore out. And so we're requesting to get another machine. We did send out for 3 bids. This machine in particular that we're asking to purchase, we were able to demo, and it works great in our scenario, and it's easy to clean and easy to maintain. So with that, I'll entertain any questions, but it's basically to help us keep the garage clean and tracking all kinds of mud into our building.
Questions for Director Coddington? Motion by Trustee Vosburg, support by Trustee DeMink, or comments from the public? I missed that one on the last one, but it seemed like there's a whole lot of. Motion by Trustee Vosburg, support by Trustee DeMink to approve item 8I as submitted. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 in a row from the Treasurer's Office. 8J, approve a request by the Treasurer's Office to collect 100% of the Macomb Intermediate School District 2020 tax levy in the summer and adopt a resolution 2019-46.
Move to approve.
Motion by Treasurer LaFata,
Support.
support by Clerk Barry. These come every year. And if we are going to ask questions, maybe ask them just on one question. Oh, Deputy Clerk.
This is standard approval every year. They have to request the township to collect some taxes. We do charge them a fee. The current fee right now is $1.65 per parcel. Sorry, I'm trying to give a little for the intermediate school district, we collect 100% of their taxes in the summer.
Questions for Treasurer or Deputy Treasurer Clerk? Motion by Treasurer LaFata, support by Clerk Barry to approve item 8J and adopt resolution 2019-46. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMay.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
8K.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Oh, aye. I'm already moving on. 8K, approve a request by the Treasurer's Office to collect 100% of the Macomb Community College 2020 tax levy in the summer and adopt Resolution 2019-47.
Motion to adopt Resolution 2019-47.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Treasurer LaFata. Discussion. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Supervisor Acci.
Aye. 8L, approve a request by the Treasurer's Office to collect 100% of Lance Creek School District 2020 tax levy in the summer and adopt Resolution 2019-48.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee
Support.
Joseph, support by Trustee Anderson. Discussion. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acci.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
8M, approve a request by the Treasurer's Office to collect 50% of the Anchor Bay School District 2020 tax levy in the summer and adopt Resolution 2019-49.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Anderson.
Support.
Support by Trustee Domingue. Discussion. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Vosburg.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acci.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion passes. Thank you to Deputy Treasurer Clark and the Treasurer. 8N, discussion of the recommendation of the Cannabis Committee. Do I have a motion to open for discussion?
Motion to open the discussion.
Motion by Clerk Berry.
Support.
Support by Trustee Joseph. We do have three members on the Cannabis Committee that are part of this board, Clerk Berry, Trustee Joseph, and Trustee Anderson. I think I'll turn it over to the right side of the table.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Joseph and I were appointed as co-chairs of the Cannabis Committee that was approved and developed by the board about a year ago. The Cannabis Committee has been meeting monthly and some additional meetings as well to review all of the issues associated with this very complex matter. And we were charged with delivering to the board a recommendation after completing all of our analysis. The Cannabis Committee met last night, and the conclusion that the Cannabis Committee came to, we had reviewed a format for preparing a white paper to deliver to the board that exact objective. And the Cannabis Committee felt that, and it was unanimous, that perhaps a better method for delivering the information to the board would be in the form of a presentation, an informational presentation that would essentially boil down all of the information that we had received and have received over the last year and package that information for public consumption as well as for review by the board, and then allow the board to provide additional direction how they would like to proceed. And I'd like to turn over to Trustee Joseph. He's going to be assisting, he and I are going to be creating the PowerPoint presentation, and I know Trustee Joseph has done that for a number of other issues that we've dealt with, public safety and so forth over the years, and he's agreed to do it for this as well, and I'd like to turn it over to him and make some additional comments on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I got volunteered for the PowerPoint last night, but the PowerPoint comes about as a result of trying to keep consistent and be true to the duties that we were charged with. It's a very difficult process because when we started it a year ago, the question became, what are we recommending to the board? So our mission was to make a recommendation to the board, and there are so many nuances to what the board might be willing to consider. So individuals who might be in favor of a particular license in a particular area is a lot different than another proposal which calls for multiple dispensaries or marijuana everywhere in our township. So how do you ask the question in a multitude of ways, in essence, to pull the board? It's very difficult to make a recommendation to the board that says, do you support what? The sale, the growing, the transporting, none of it? And within the details of what options are available, you have potentially different opinions and different answers from the same individual. I support this, but I don't support that. I would like to see if we're going to do anything with marijuana, it'd be in this particular area and not in this area. So that has become really clear to those of us on the committee as we've listened to presentations from every conceivable source, not only from the law enforcement side. Mr. Coddington's team came in and talked about potential infrastructure demands with a grow operation. We heard from our police chief in terms of problems that could be, associated with different extraction methods for edibles. And so we've learned quite a bit, and we've heard from a lot of businesses and potential businesses. And so what we thought, instead of bringing a very hard and fast recommendation from the committee, is just to synopsize all that we've dealt with over the last year, bring it to the board in a PowerPoint, and then begin the discussion from the board on what path we might want to take as it relates to marijuana. What we have is a tentative timeline. We have a cannabis committee meeting at the end of January, and then we will come immediately to the board with the PowerPoint. I really think it's imperative that every member of the board be involved in that process, and so I want to make sure that we, if we bring anything to the board for action, that everyone is available to weigh in on. That it's a very important decision and something that I know people feel very strongly about, and I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to weigh in on this. So tentatively, what we are looking to do is develop the PowerPoint, taking input from all the committee members. Clerk Berry and I will finalize it and hope to have a dry run at our cannabis committee meeting in January, and then bring it to the board in the second meeting in January for board review. And Trustee Anderson, I believe, also, like I said.
I believe that date is January 28th, and I believe that the board, after the presentation by the two co-chairs of the Marijuana Commission, the board may be polled to see if we continue with it, with this process, or whether it ceases. Correct. Thank you.
And in addition to that, Mr. Supervisor, the Cannabis Committee also agreed, because of timing, to meet on January the 23rd. On our township calendar, it has the Cannabis Committee meeting on the 27th, but it was determined that it would be best to meet on the 23rd in order to have any presentation materials available for the board packet to be published that week for the presentation on the 28th. So there will be a Cannabis Committee meeting at 6 p.m. on Thursday, January 23rd, where we will be finalizing the details of the presentation. That presentation will then be submitted to the board in their board packet for the agenda, and the presentation itself to the board will take place tentatively on Tuesday, January the 28th at the regularly scheduled board meeting.
Any Trustee Domingue?
There is a probably 60% possibility I will not be at that meeting. After you asked me, I made some. Could we do it the first meeting in February?
Absolutely.
Is that okay with you guys? Thank you.
Would that?
Absolutely.
Might
After
actually
you
work
said
better.
something, David, I
for the
made a
presentation.
text, and thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's fine.
Treasurer, no, Trustee Vosburg.
Thank you. I was going to ask, on that 28th, is action expected then? Will the information be given to us in a packet with certain motions and/or suggestions?
Yes, the indication in all of the discussion at the Cannabis Committee meeting was that the night that the presentation will be done is that there's expected action on that date as well. There will
Okay.
be an agenda item accompanying it to
Okay, so now
ask
you-
for board action on that time.
That's being changed then to February?
To February.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, we will have to, we'll bring that in front of the Cannabis Committee, but given the fact that there's 3 members of the Cannabis Committee here, just to confirm with the other 2 members that the February date is acceptable. The first, yes, February 11th, the first.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Treasurer LaFata.
There's going to be a presentation at the board meeting, a PowerPoint presentation at the board meeting,
That's
Yes, sir.
correct.
and then we're supposed to take action. And that's what really gets me, because every time there's something really important, we get the facts and we get finding of what's going to be proposed, and then we're asked to immediately afterwards, without any thought, take a board action. And this just isn't right for something as important as this.
I'm sorry.
No, I think point of clarification is the presentation will be in the last meeting in July, but the vote will be held on the 11th, polling the board. Correct?
No, just if I understood the request from trustee Demink was that he will not be present on the 28th.
Correct.
And would like to see the presentation be part of the deliberation. In terms of Treasurer LaFata's
I mean, if you guys
concern.
want to have it, I can always watch it on video, but you guys make the call.
No, I think, and again, maybe we just need to clarify with the committee. Trustee Vosburg's question, will there be a plan, will there be something to vote on, if you will? It's a very difficult question because there are about 15 different scenarios. And I think what the Cannabis Committee is wrestling with is we have to narrow down the direction of the board in terms of general feelings about it. Some people feel very, very strongly about it and are not necessarily interested in entertaining any cannabis recreational use licenses, and have made it very clear that the opt-out is the route that they anticipate going. If that is a common feeling, the Cannabis Committee is really done all the work that we can do. We've gathered all of the information that we can do, and I think we've arrived at a place where there is some political input that is needed. And so I don't know, I don't envision a scenario in the PowerPoint that I'm looking to put forward that says, does the board approve this zone in this place at this license? I don't know that we're going to be able to get there on the meeting in February. There has to be some direction provided to the Cannabis Committee in terms of where the board feels, and I'm hoping that through that discussion and through the the presentation and some Q&A, because I do agree. I don't know that we can arrive at a place that says we're going to do exactly this and exactly that. What we do have is our planner and our attorney have been very, very involved in the last 2 Cannabis Committee meetings, and sort of affirmed last night that once the board decides what the board wants to do, the legal and the zoning is not as complicated as I think our committee first thought. It really requires some direction that is only political in nature. It can really only be hammered out once the board understands what direction we're going. So I don't know that we have an absolute action to take that says, yes, the township will begin distributing, have dispensaries in this area. I don't know that we're going to have that in February. There will be something for the board to consider regarding our next step.
If I could.
My name was mentioned, may I just, so if there's something to vote on, it may be more in terms of directing the committee on bring something that looks like this back, but it won't be a final decision then?
I think that's a very fair way of saying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, my expectations, first, we are unbelievably contentious up here, and we will be probably again in about 2 minutes. But I appreciate the 3 members for serving on this committee. I don't think any local municipality has had a more difficult issue and real mess handed to them to try to sort out, and you're seeing it all around us. So my expectations are that I think the vision that they laid out meets my expectations. That committee was tasked with gathering all the information and coming back with a recommendation. Now, the problem is the recommendation, Treasurer, this is maybe trying to get to your point, can't be the details of the policy, which is exactly what you need. It's going to take a lot of time to actually draft that. It'll need 2 pieces. One is a regulatory, and one is a zoning. And and they're all going to need public hearings, their ordinances, and it's going to take a lot of time to get through Planning Commission, and then to us, and one for regulatory. So I think what the committee is after is, are we even interested in proceeding with drafting potential ordinances to move forward for actual action on, just in a concept, because I don't think that you'll have the regulatory ordinance drafted by that date. So it'd be more of a testing the temperatures. I understand.
I think that's
correctly?
100%. The feedback that we get from Mr. Siebert and really our planning department, if the board's position is that the cannabis industry is like any other industry, any other legal product, then it takes the shape, and the zoning and the legal sort of review takes the shape of any other product, from a manufacturing standpoint, from a distribution standpoint. And so taking that approach makes it a very straightforward, and there are policies and procedures in place that we would do with any business. The question becomes, does the board see it that way? Because that truly is a political decision. And if there is a belief that, no, this is not potentially like the analogy that was used for some of the grow operations. If you were growing poinsettias, or you were growing, and now you're growing marijuana, does the board see it that way? Because that's really the decision, and that's the hurdle that we need to answer before we go to the next process, which is ordinance, legal, hearings, postings, and all of the things. So the reason that it's imperative that we take action, and I just want to share this with you, is that we've had a group of investors and entrepreneurs from all over the state, and I mean multi-million-dollar operations that are operational in other communities, particularly Ann Arbor. They're familiar with the industry. They know exactly what they'd like to do. They see Chesterfield as a real opportunity, and they come to these cannabis committee meetings on a regular basis. And at some point, they're, like they're doing in every other community, trying to allow us time to figure out what it is that we're going to do directionally. And I think they've been very, very patient with us. And I would like to take a direction, because they are not going to wait forever. And what I mean by that is that they will bring and force the hand of the township, like they've done in some other communities, with a ballot initiative. And if that's the position that some people feel we go, that's okay too. But we should deliberate. We've had all the information we need to really answer a very straightforward political question. We'd like to lay it out for you in a PowerPoint, give you some ideas and some options, and then we poll and see where we're going, and then whether or not we engage the legal and the planning and so forth.
I'll go to Trustee Demink in 1 second, and just so we have, I know everybody up here knows this, we actually already have taken action. We are opted out. So we opted out a year ago from recreation, and by doing nothing, we opted out of medical. So I would expect at that point, we're going to be either, we're already opted out, so we wouldn't necessarily have to make that vote again. You'd either continuing, maybe to proceed to utilize legal and our consultants to begin drafting an ordinance, maybe under these various parameters, might be what the agenda item looks like. Trustee Demink.
Is it maybe some other board members knows, or Mr. Siebert knows, but isn't there only 2 communities in Macomb County that have opted in, Mount Clemens and Harrison Township? Oh, Lennox did?
Lennox, I'm sorry, Trustee Demink, I can answer that question. Lennox, New Baltimore, Harrison, Warren.
I didn't think Warren did yet.
Warren's coming. Warren's coming online with that as well.
Those are just medical though, correct? Not recreational in Clinton Township.
Some are growing operations, some are dispensaries.
I thought it was
There's-
only Mount Clemens and Harrison.
Those are grow operations. Those are grow operations. New Baltimore has a dispensary. They were going to be having their Lennox dispensaries as well. Warren is coming online with what they are doing as well. It's just a matter of what it's going to look like, because they were issuing licenses as well, and then they end up in court and all of that sort of thing. There's quite a few that have. Clinton Township might be getting handed their hand in that.
Well, I heard that. I talked to some of their officials the other day.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the worst position to be in, because then you have the least amount of control. But these are all things that the Cannabis Committee has discussed, and then we're going to bring forward to the board all of these, potential strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats with regards to this particular issue. I think there's tremendous opportunity for Chesterfield, but I think there's some real threats out there, and one of the threats is that we may be finding ourselves in a situation similar to Clinton Township where they'll be dictating terms and so on and so forth. There's a number of things, but we're going to lay that all out in the presentation for you based on all of the information, the statistical data that we've received, as well as what the current legal environments look like, as well as political environments. And then it'll be up to the board to give us the direction in terms of, yes, this is something we think we'd like to do, and then we can go back to the drawing board and find out what that might look like.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. We'll have there's no action on this item, but the Cannabis Committee will be back in front of this board on February 11th for presentation. I'm sorry, Treasurer LaFatta, do you want to go again?
Well, I'm just wondering, in this presentation, there's pros and cons to everything. And I watched the news. Marijuana is legal in California, and they have a major issue with black market, because the black market, you get a better deal on your weed because you don't have to pay taxes. If something's going to be brought to the board, we should be looking at both sides of the issue. What are the pros and what are the cons to have this in our township? Is it going to make it more available in our schools? Is it going to take more police patrols because there is going to be black market activity? Like I said, I think we need to bring everything to the board that's going to make the board make an intelligent decision.
And if I may, I think the comments you make are exactly what the Cannabis Committee is looking for. I think when we bring it forward and there are questions that maybe the Cannabis Committee hasn't answered, then you get right back to what Trustee Anderson was talking about, which is the exercise in terms of bringing the PowerPoint presentation forward enlightens the board, and it gives the Cannabis Committee some direction. If there are unanswered questions, then perhaps it goes back to the committee for further, and maybe people aren't comfortable voting on anything until those questions are answered. So we were charged with bringing to the board a recommendation in November, and we really did work very hard to try to accomplish that timeline. We're now at a place where we just need to bring it to the board and get feedback and direction, and that's what we look to do, I guess, in February now.
Okay, thank you.
No action on this item. Any further comments? This may actually require, depending on, I anticipated this at some point, maybe requiring its own meeting, depending on how far it moves along.
Yeah.
But I like the 11th concept, and we'll see if it needs more on top of that. So no action on item 8. Do I need to do anything with that?
We just need to take, there was no vote taken for the discussion.
So no vote taken, so we had a motion, and a second, and the discussion occurred. Okay, item 9, no addendum. Item 10, public comment. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and state your name for the record. Item 11, board comment. Trustee Domingue.
To start with, I'd like to offer my condolences to Amanda Willard, our Leisure Services Director. I just found out today that her mom passed over the weekend. So at least from myself, and I'm sure the rest of my board members, to Amanda, our dear sympathies to you and your family in the passing of your mom. I'd like to thank Mr. Gendernalik for the detailed description and about the property, he being a lifelong resident and knowing a lot more. And I think thanks a lot, Gary. Appreciate that information. And I'd like to thank the Road Commission for finally getting the bridge open 2 weeks ago. That was the best Christmas present. And to all the residents of the township, I wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. To the township employees and to my 6 other board members and Mr. Siebert, have a great Christmas and a prosperous New Year. That's it.
Trustee Vosburg.
Thank you. Once again, thank you to Officer Wilson for wanting to come and work for us. Wish you well in your new career. And also, Merry Christmas to everyone listening and everyone here in the room, and happy holidays. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you again. Congratulations to Officer Wilson, one of our Anchor Bay graduates that will now be one of our officers. Glad the bridge is open because there's a picture out there somewhere of Trustee Demink kneeling in the middle of the bridge, thanking the bridge gods or whoever it was. I'm not sure. Is that for public consumption or not? Finally, you may or may not know the names of former residents Bill Kakowski and Carl Mark Paul, who both passed away this past year. Both were longtime members of the Township's former Police Advisory Board. They were strongly supportive of our Chesterfield Township Police Department during a time when there were vigorous sentiments to abolish our own department and to contract out law enforcement functions to an outside agency. I would like to give credit to these gentlemen, as well as a host of others who were successful in maintaining home rule as applies to our police department. I'd ask you to keep Bill and Carl's families in your thoughts. And finally, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all our residents and whatever. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you. Just wanted to share a correspondence that our board received from Public Works Commissioner Candace Miller. She indicates in this letter that I believe was sent to the whole board. I think it was, yes. That the Public Works Commissioner has, as anybody knows, Ms. Miller is out there working pretty hard in a number of areas, and one of them involves finance. And looking at opportunities to refinance bonds is something that her office takes very seriously. She writes to tell us that there was recently some refinancing of the Oakland-Macomb Interceptor Drain District asset, and the refinancing saved over $87,000. Again, just great work. It continues to come from our Drain Commissioner, and it was nice to get that correspondence. She does a wonderful job of communicating to the districts that she serves, and Chesterfield, of course, is one of them. So gratitude to the Public Works Commissioner and their office. Also wanted to thank Treasurer LaFata. He came to our Township Planning Commission meeting last week and updated the board on the F-35, something that he is very passionate about and concerned. He worked very hard to make sure that the township is adequately represented on the Selfridge Sustainability Study, which has taken place, and we understand through the Executive Hackle's office that the county was awarded this very sought-after grant to look very deeply into the sustainability of the base and its relationship to the F-35. Treasurer LaFata is one of the only people I know who is really out there actively engaged in what could be concerns, things that could impact our township, and sharing them with the Planning Commission, sharing them with residents, and I'm sure we'll be sharing them next month when we have our first sustainability study meeting, which I believe is scheduled for January 9th. So thank you, Treasurer LaFata. He's done an incredible amount of research, including the challenges that were faced by communities similar to ours in other states that were recently awarded the F-35. And so taking a look at what that looks like for our community is a very daunting task. If you know Treasurer LaFata, you know that he's not really concerned about resistance. He is a pretty tenacious guy, and I'm very proud to serve on the sustainability study and on this board, to be quite frank. The work that our planning commission is slightly confusing right now. We've had some debate over scheduling, and so anybody knows that our last board meeting, the board approved a list of board meetings and changes. The changes to this board's meetings have had ripple effects on other board meetings, and the presentation that we had was that this board, in essence, was the master board and it had the status. And the reality is that there are bylaws associated with the Planning Commission, and if the Planning Commission does not approve their bylaws outlining the days of the month that they will meet, they have autonomy. There's an ability to do that. And so at our Planning Commission meeting, there was no support for a motion to approve our meeting calendar or our bylaws, which is terribly frustrating. And it speaks to a disjointedness that I would really like to see repaired in our last year together on the board, because as it stands right now, we have no meeting scheduled in January. I'm also concerned about this board's next meeting. We pushed forward with a schedule change, and we now have a situation where vendors who get payment will not have the benefit of a board meeting. So the way that the December ends, we're mid-month, and we won't have another meeting, and it really does change the payment schedule. So I'm very concerned about how we pay our vendors, and I really don't have much in the way of an ability to impact that other than what I offered during the deliberations on the calendar at the last board meeting. And it speaks to a larger issue in terms of what a trustee can really do. There are vigorous debates, and there are issues like we had before us tonight. Conceptually, you have what is very well presented by some of our long-serving residents, an opportunity, a vision, a place that could be part of the township landscape for generations to come. On the opposition and on the other side of the debate is, what do you do with resources that are minimal and so many existing projects? On the surface, it seems like a very principled discussion. There's no real wrong answer there. There is just a position that is held. I would like to see in our last year an ability to focus on those issues. And I'm not going to speculate on why we don't, because there'll be a rebuttal on why we don't, and it'll be somebody else, and we'll just go back and forth all night. But if we could do what we are trying to do on the Cannabis Committee and incorporate that in all of our debates, and the way I think cannabis is rolling out in a very potentially controversial topic, it's rolling out well because there's a willingness to share information at every step of the way. There's not two people on a committee that go off into a room somewhere, hatch a plan, and then bring it to the board for a vote. We've taken, and Clerk Barry and I haven't gotten along, just great every step of the way. But we co-chair a committee. We are faithful to the charge. We bring information to the board in a very deliberative process. We leave nothing behind the scenes. We don't caucus anywhere. Everything is done right out in the open. And everybody gets an opportunity to deliberate and weigh in on it. And that's the way a project should be chaired. And unfortunately, I think there's a feeling on this board that there's a lot of things that happen that there's a class system here, and there's a need to know, and there's an attempt to manage outcomes. And it's taken very personally by some members of the board, me in particular. I don't like it. And if that pushes me into a place where all I can do is just make my case, then that's what I'll do. If I'm on the 3 side of a 4-3 vote every week, that's okay. I'm not thin-skinned, and there's nobody on this board that I have any ill will towards. So we get a little bit heated here in the deliberations, but I care very deeply for my fellow board members and their families. And you're working with great people that have wonderful, spouses and children and grandchildren. And those things are real. Those are the real things that are happening when you put 7 people together with very strong ideas. We get a little ugly at times, but it's hopefully for the residents. Hopefully it is because you feel passionately about what it is that you're deliberating on. And I wish no ill will towards anybody, but I see things very differently, and I will speak about them. And I ultimately, as Trustee Anderson said a board meeting ago, I represent the people that put me on the board. That's it. That's who I'm up here for. It's not a social club, as you can see. It can get pretty rough at times. With that said, I respect everybody here. As the families that we all share are very important to us. I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas, and I hope we have a very productive 2020. Thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Very short, brief comments tonight. The Elections Department will be presenting at the first board meeting in January to the board. We will have a presentation to share with you that outlines the changes in all of our voting precincts, the additions of the precincts, how that will affect our electorate, so that should you be ever asked any questions regarding that or where people vote or things like that, sometimes most people, we encourage them to call the clerk's office, but oftentimes they'll just grab the closest board member and say, hey, we used to vote here. Do you know why we're voting somewhere else? Or there's been some changes. What do you know about that? And we'd like to make sure that all of the board members are aware of the changes that the Election Commission sanctioned and that the Election Department and the Clerk's Department is implementing. So that will be presented to you at the first meeting in January, and we will also have an additional informational meeting for residents who are and voters who are affected that week as well, and that will be a separate meeting for the public to come and see that presentation again and to ask any questions that are specific to their particular situation. So we look forward to doing that in January. Thank you.
Treasurer LaFato.
The Treasurer's Department will be open extended hours on December the 27th as required by Michigan statute from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 p.m. to collect your taxes. As Trustee Joseph mentioned, there was some F-35 base placement developments within the last 5 weeks. Back on November 4th, Madison, Wisconsin, that was cited to have the F-35As, sent a letter to the Secretary of the Air Force. It was 22 pages long from discussions they had in their township with 25 questions that needed to be answered. And at the end of it, they said, if there are no means to effectively reduce the mental health burdens, we respectfully oppose Air Force basing of F-35s at Trucks Air Force Base here in Madison, Wisconsin. Shortly after that, on November 25th, there was a signed letter that was sent to Congress of the United States, addressed to the Secretary of the Air Force, from 14 Michigan politicians. None of them live within 100 miles of here, and they all told the Air Force that F-35s need to be here at Selfridge. There's some comments in here from Burlington, Vermont, where they've actually torn down 216 homes because they were in the noise level of over 80 decibels constantly. One of the issues that came up in Madison is the data that they've been using for the sustainability study based on the use of afterburners for the F-35 was only 5% of the time, which they found out is 50% of the time, which raises the decibel level to 4 times that of an F-16 when they take off and land. And it puts another 12,478 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere in the immediate area. So there's a lot of concerns on the sustainability study moving forward. There's a meeting the first part of January, and there's a lot of issues. And I'm hoping that when I go to this meeting, they can understand what's already happening. Actually, Madison, Wisconsin went to Burlington, Vermont to experience the noise for themselves, and the Air Force grounded the F-35s while they were there. So, you know, I don't have a lot of faith in their data and how these studies are done. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And as scriptures are written, there were only 3 wise men. Thank you.
A little holiday humor. I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a safe and happy New Year. Our next board meeting is 4 weeks from tonight, which is Monday, or I'm sorry, it's Tuesday, January 14th, 2019. We do have a closed session, 12A, to discuss.
20, January 2020.
January, oh yes, oh yeah. January 14th, 2020. Wow. 12, we have a closed session, 12A, discussion regarding strategy and negotiation sessions pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Vosburg to go into closed session. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosburg.
Vosburg.
Trustee Vosburg.
Say.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Demink. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akivetti.
Aye. We are in closed session at 9:46 PM.
Go back into open session.
Are you ready, Michelle? Do I have a motion to re-enter open session?
Motion to go back in open
Motion by
session.
Trustee Demink,
Support.
support by Clerk Berry to re-enter open session. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Demink. Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson. Trustee Joseph. Trustee Vosburg. Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akivetti.
Aye. We are back in closed session at
Open
10:01 PM.
10:01 a.m.
Motion to adjourn by Trustee Demink, support by
Aye.
Trustee Anderson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying nay. We are adjourned at 10:02 PM.
Okay, so if we have a salary of $100,000,
Yeah.
okay, $100,000,